Just demoing a simple sunflower. As you know, I've started a Patreon channel, and I want to do some more simple lessons for people who are just starting out. And so I've got a simple sunflower today, and I picked it not only it's on a simple background, but there's a nice shadow and some light we can paint there. So anyhow, I've got everything set up. And here I've got my glass palette, and I've got black, white, yellow ochre. This is cad yellow light, not medium. Indian yellow, sap green, brown oxide, red oxide, orange, ultramarine blue. And I had out some fun pinks only because I painted the rose yesterday. But permanent rose, magenta, quinacridone red. So I don't know how much of that I'll use, but who knows. So I've got out my terp jar to the side, and this is some canvas paper that I'll be using for these little demos. So there's so many ways you can paint a sunflower, but one of the ways I like to do it to explain, a simple method is, first of all, when you're going to paint a flower with bigger petals like the sunflower, I use a larger brush. So this is just an old rosemary brush I had from years ago. It's a number 7. So if you have a 6 or an 8, a sunflower petal is quite, thick. So I don't want to use something like this. This would be more what I'd use for a daisy, for example. So you just got to think about some of those things when you're starting. So I can just sort of block in a bit of this Indian yellow because it has such a nice glow to it. And I'm just going to get some, there's different ways I paint them too. So sometimes I really, go stroke by stroke, looking at all the different ways the sunflower petals go. And then some days I block in more like this, kind of more of a mass shape, and then I make the strokes. So today I'm going to try to keep it simple, which for me is sometimes difficult. And I'm getting a little bit of this Indian yellow going. I'm looking at the reference photo, so I am sort of paying attention to the direction. You'll notice all the petals, because the sunflower is facing out, all the petals are kind of going around. It surprises me sometimes how the simplest things you can overlook when you're painting a flower. And direction of petal is one thing you want to really pay attention to. So I'm just going to get a little red oxide. This is a transparent red oxide. And I want to just sort of block in the center. This is just a block in phase. You can work on one sunflower if you wanted to for a long time. So there's just this, I had a lot of struggle getting sunflowers to stand out. So I'd go through tons of yellow paint trying to, really get the depth that I wanted. So I finally found this is an easy sort of formula for those who are new to painting to use. So far all I have is Indian yellow and this brown oxide. And when I take my brush and kind of blend it in with the Indian yellow, you can see without a lot of effort, there's some depth already, even though I only have a little wash of paint on there. Another thing you can do is get I have a Viva paper towel, and I'm going to look at my reference photo, and I'm going to squint with my eyes and see how much darker this is compared to this. And sometimes it helps just to, lift off some of the paint where you've got that real bright highlight. So it gives you sort of almost like a road map to where the highlights are going to go. And then you've got these little tips will be light, but you want to keep that shadow there. So just an idea of, giving your eye a little bit of a, and then you can I sometimes will bring in some of the shadow, just dragging across some of that paint again. But this is really thin now, so you got a good stage to put some bright highlight on there. So now I'm just gonna, now that I've got that blocked in, notice I haven't done really anything, you know, with the tips or anything. I'm just mainly focusing on this center shape. And it's important because if your sunflower is tilted at all, you want to look at that center shape and see, is it really round, or is it maybe more, when the sunflower is tilted that way, you're only seeing, you know, a triangle of that shape. So you got to really train your eye to pay attention to those things. I'm just going to get a little bit more, I want to put a few darker petals in there just to have in the background. Just get a few more of those darks in there. And that'll help later too to really pop out those bright yellow petals. So, all right, so now we have a little base, and before I get going on the bright yellow, I'm gonna go and get something to darken the center. So I'll get some, you can get some brown oxide, and you can just add that in there. I don't want to mix any blue or anything in there yet because I don't want too many colors to start mixing in with the yellow and getting too mucky. So I'm kind of, you notice I'm kind of making those little marks as I go to show the little, you know, variations in the where the petals come into the center. And then I'm going to soften these ones off here because they're in the shadow. Just gently touching my brush down there. And now I'm going to go and just clean my brush a bit, and I want to get some of this cad yellow light, and it says medium but it's light. I wrote it with a Sharpie so I couldn't really get rid of it right away. So I've got a little bit of that cad yellow light, and I can mix a little orange into that, and then I'll have basically a cad yellow medium color, or almost a cad yellow deep. So we can get that, and I kind of get my brush loaded with some of that, and I'm gonna put on a few of those sort of mid-tone strokes there, just to get a little, you want to build up a little more paint on there. And I'll bring it into the center by pulling in just real gently into that center there. I don't want to take away that shadow there. And just sort of go around, and now I'm sort of paying more attention to those petals on the outside of the sunflower and the direction that I see some of them going. So there's just at this stage, it's basically, I'm just adding kind of this almost a similar color, but it's just a little thicker. You can also add some Indian yellow to your cad yellow light, and you get a really pretty, really nice yellow. And just kind of getting a little more paint on there. And just have a look at your reference photo and just kind of see the direction that those strokes are going, and kind of bringing those in. So now there's some really neat, you know, layers going, and I want to get a little bit of a highlight of that cad yellow light on the far side there. So I'm going to just kind of shovel up some of that yellow and get a real highlight on a few of these where it gets real bright. And I might even add a little touch of white to that so I can really get get it to stand out more. And there's some highlights on some of the tips here, so I'll get a bit of that. But you mainly have the light hitting this side here. So it's really important when you're painting a flower to really squint down and look at where the light source is to give it that depth. And now I want to get this a little darker. So I'll get some of that red oxide and some of the cad yellow light. Kind of makes basically kind of like a raw umber color that you can pour out of the tube, but I want to try to keep a simple palette for everyone. You can warm it up a little by using some of that quinacridone red just to warm it up and get that shadow nice and warm. And I'll put in some of that here just to really, oops, wrong puddle. I'll just kind of put some of that shadow back in there. I even add a little more of that red. And I just want to go and get that shadow back in. It kind of lost it there. And then there's shadow on behind here, so I want to get some of that in there. And then when you get some of that in there like that, I might even add a little orange. Yeah, the orange gives it that real, like the light's coming through the petals and creating that real warm glow. So when you get some of that on like that, now you can kind of blend. So I've dried my brush off, and now I'm just gonna kind of blend it in a little. Notice I haven't added many colors, no green, no blue. I've kept the colors very warm. And you can make it more complicated if you want to, and I would just keep it simple to start with until you really get used to building those, you know, the values. So the next thing, you know, we got to do is, you wouldn't really paint a sunflower on a white canvas generally unless you're like me doing a demo. First of all, I want to punch that center in just a little more. So I'll get a little of that brown oxide and some ultramarine blue. And I'm going to get that little mark in the center there just so that, you know, it just takes it down even more into the center. And then I'm using the very edge of my brush just to ruffle the edges a little. So now it punches it in one more level. And there's a little bit of shadow behind here. Okay, before I get too fussy with all the values, we've got some of the values going here. You can get some real dark in that shadow area there and just get it in. Same color as the center, the brown oxide and the ultramarine blue. And I'll bring some of those edges up. You know, you can just soften that because it's in the shadow, so you want it to be soft. And I'm going to get a little sap green and just put it into that same pile of paint. And if you're watching and you're new to my channel, don't forget to subscribe, and also go to my YouTube and subscribe so that you can watch these little lessons as they come up. And so I've got some sap green here, and I'm just going to work some of this in because you wouldn't, you know, you would have something behind it like a blue sky, and I want you to see how that will make the sunflower show up. So I've got sap green. I can mix some yellow ochre. That'll make a pretty green, just sap green and some yellow ochre. And I just want to add that so you can see the edges pop a bit. Also, it's another way of painting edges is to cut into the sunflower, some of the greens. You can get some magenta in your background to complement your sunflower. Put in a little magenta. And this way you can kind of, before we get to, I want to show you the finishing touches, because the beginning of the sunflower that you've seen so far is kind of, it's really just the start. You can, so I'm just kind of getting something around here. Okay, so now you got that background in a bit so you can see the edges more. One of the things I like to do with the sunflower edges is you want to really, I like to put a lot of thick paint to show them off. So just putting out some more paint. I didn't realize I'd use so much, but I scoop up a lot of paint with sunflower petals on the edges, and I'll just take some of that cad yellow light, maybe add a tiny bit of Indian yellow to it. And you notice I'm holding my brush different because I'm just going to go in and put a blob down on the edge, and you see that leaves a nice thick mark. So you can put it right down on the background color and then just lift off as you get towards the center, but you get some really nice thick strokes. I'll get, you know, another, maybe add white to really get the volume of the highlight up and bring that in. And if you get a bit of the background in, you can always just put thicker paint on top there. And up here you can put a highlight on the edge of some of these. And there's a few catching the light there. And then you can always take your brush and, you know, soften the edges by just bringing your brush over the sunflower and out. And I'll get a little more of that yellow. And even if the sunflower in the photo doesn't always have a lot going on in the center, like this one looks like it looks like it was glued together by someone, but it isn't. I'll kind of, I'll always put something in the middle, you know, maybe a little hint of those little bendy ones that kind of curl in a bit. And just to make it a little more interesting, you can add some of those. And let's get more of that yellow. And you can add a little bit more thick paint on that highlight there. And then you can get some of the background and make it a little more interesting. Cut in some of that background here and there just to pop it out a little more. And then underneath your lightest petal you can get some darker paint, and that'll really, again, the contrast will make those petals stand out. Sunflowers are They're one of my favorite flowers to paint. And they're sort of just a happy flower to paint. So if you're stuck and you haven't painted in a while and you just kind of want to do something to relax, just, paint one flower that you really like. Paint a sunflower and just have fun. Don't worry about making a painting. And sometimes for beginners, this canvas paper is just from Michaels. It was really super inexpensive. It's not fancy French or anything. Like, you can buy those real fancy ones that you can use, but it's cheap and it works really well, and it's a good thing. You don't put as much pressure on yourself if you feel like you have to make something out of a canvas. Sometimes in the beginning when you're learning to paint, that can be a little intimidating because you feel like you're wasting a canvas if you're not getting a good enough painting. So that's another tip. Just bring your canvas pad out and just paint something for fun. And then once I get some of these colors going, I might switch now to a little smaller brush and some fun details. And everyone has different ways of expressing themselves. So for me, I like adding some more colors to my sunflower. So in the center, I'll get a little magenta, for example, and some white, maybe a little bit of ultramarine blue. Or you can make a nice purple with ultramarine blue and quinacridone red, and that makes a pretty, whoops, a little too much quinacridone there, but yeah, you can make a real pretty purple. If you're trying to mix a purple, like I was in my early days using alizarin, you'll always get a gray color. So switch to either quinacridone or permanent rose to mix with your cobalt or your ultramarine blue, and you'll get a prettier purple. And I'm just adding little bits of purple in the shadow. Sometimes I'll add, some of it in the background. And then you can, soften some of that off there. And then I'll add a little bit of this quinacridone red. And, some of the tips have some pretty reds. I'll add a bit here and there, just to make it a little more exciting. If you get too much on there, you can just take a dry brush and kind of shape it out a little if you think it's a little overboard. And then I can maybe add a little blue to that and pop in a little bit of a bluey color. You can have fun with colors, just play around with it, and just adding a little. Sometimes I'll add a little more highlight here and there. Sometimes I'll just say, well, the whole thing just needs a little more attitude, so I'll go and put, one whole petal kind of coming across like that. It's just it looks too, formula that way. So you can have fun with your sunflower, and you use the reference photo, but then you can add little things that you want. I'm just adding some dark now, just around those edges, just to really kind of send it back a little more and show that there's a little bit of shape here. And just sort of play around with that, and you can really add a highlight, and that'll send that right above the sunflower there. Anyways, I'm mucking it up a little, but you get the idea. So I hope you enjoyed this little demo as much as I did. I love painting sunflowers, and this will go on my Patreon channel with the reference photo and the video for later. And I just want to see and say hi. I can't really see you guys when I'm painting, but I can see that I'm glad that you guys could join me. It's more fun painting live for you than just by myself, so I'm glad that you could join. And I'll look forward to doing more of these. Probably I'll do one once a month so that we get on a regular schedule. And look forward to doing more of these. Hi, Marty. And hello, everyone. And anyways, I'm so glad that you guys could all join me today. I'll look forward to seeing you. I'll post the next one when I'm going to go live. And so you guys have time to kind of plan your day a bit for it. So, hi, Gail. And, yeah. Okay, well, I hope you have a great week. And if you want to share your sunflower painting, you can go to Bold Strokes on Facebook and share your painting with me there. And see what you can do. Thank you.